Today, we're diving into the story of Deepinder Goyal. He's the founder who took the feeling of being completely ignored and channeled it into building Zomato, a company that now has the attention of millions. So how on earth did he pull that off? Just try to imagine that for a second. You want to speak, you have something to say, and people just turn their backs. For Deepinder Goyal, this wasn't a one-time thing. It was his reality. And that feeling of being invisible, well, that became the powerful and probably painful fuel for everything that came next. And now, talk about a contrast from being the guy no one would listen to building a platform that is absolutely impossible to ignore. In 2023 alone, Zomato grabbed almost 57% of all food delivery app downloads in India. He didn't just find a voice, he built an entire empire that pretty much everyone is listening to. So the question is, how? All right, first up, let's really get to know the underdog here. We have to understand the personal history that lit the fire in him to build something so undeniable. As a kid, Goyal really had it rough. I mean, he was facing this constant stream of challenges. He was bullied for his skin color, he had a pretty bad stammer, and he wasn't doing well in school. It even got to the point where other parents were telling their kids, hey, don't hang out with him. That kind of rejection, that's tough. And he's on the record calling that feeling of being ignored the biggest hurt. You know, when you're constantly fighting just to be heard, you really only got two options. You can shrink and disappear, or you can build something so essential that no one can ever look away again. And, well, we all know which path Goyal chose. So, how did that intense personal drive actually become a business? This next part is all about Zomato's journey, from a super simple idea to the delivery giant we know today. You know, the big aha moment didn't happen in some fancy boardroom meeting. It happened while he was at his first job at Bain & Company. He and his colleagues were wasting a ton of time just trying to find menus to order lunch. He saw this simple everyday headache and just asked the question, what if all these menus were online? This timeline really tells the story. They started with Foodie Bay back in 2008, then rebranded to Zomato a couple years later. But 2015? That was the real game changer. That's when they jumped from just listing menus to actually delivering the food. That one move completely changed their trajectory and put them on the path to that massive IPO in 2021. And you have to understand, this wasn't just a small tweak. It was a massive pivot. Before 2015, Zomato was basically in the information business. It helped you figure out what you wanted to eat. But after 2015, it became a logistics powerhouse. The whole game shifted to being about operations and getting that food to your door as fast as possible. But the evolution didn't stop with restaurant food. The next big play wasn't just about growing bigger. Goyal saw it as a straight-up bet for survival. See, Goyal was looking at the bigger picture, and he saw a huge threat coming. Companies that were already experts in last-mile delivery for things like groceries could easily slide into food delivery. But for a food company like Zomato to get into their space, that was way, way harder. So buying the quick commerce company Blinkit wasn't just a nice idea. He felt it was a move they absolutely had to make to stay alive. And it was a huge bet. Zomato bought Blinkit for $568 million. This wasn't some small side project. This was an all-in, high-stakes move to own last-mile delivery and basically future-proof the company for the next decade. And let's be clear, this was like jumping into a whole new league of difficulty. Goyal himself said that food delivery is, and I'm quoting him here, only 10% as hard as quick commerce. Why? Because with quick commerce, you're suddenly managing this insanely complex supply chain for groceries and tons of other items. It's a completely different beast. Okay, so to pull all of this off, you need a very specific kind of culture. Which brings us to Goyal's intense leadership style, what he calls the obsession mindset. This really makes you wonder about modern work culture, doesn't it? If you want to build something that truly changes the game, do you have to be committed on a level that goes way beyond a typical job? For Goyal, the answer is a very clear yes. This right here is his core belief. It's not really about the hours you're putting in, it's about the mindset you bring to those hours. He's saying you can work 9 to 5, sure, but if your attitude is just to clock out and completely forget about it, you're not going to build something great. He's looking for people who think like owners, not just employees. And here's the perfect example of what he means. He calls it the 6 p.m. Friday test. Picture it. It's 6 o'clock on a Friday. The whole office is packing up. And suddenly, boom, a massive flaw is discovered. What do? An employee might think, that's a problem for Monday. But an owner, in Goyal's view, can't rest until it's fixed because they feel the weight of that problem. That's the real test.
So what's next? After building a food empire and betting the farm on quick commerce, where do you go? Well, this final chapter is all about restructuring for an even bigger future.
So in 2024, the parent company of Zomato rebranded to Eternal. Now, this wasn't just a fancy name change. It was a fundamental restructuring. It was a signal that their vision was now bigger than just one company. Eternal would be a holding company, kind of like an umbrella, for a bunch of different businesses, with Zomato and Blinkit as the main pillars. And along with that new structure came a very clear plan for new leadership. Goyal announced he'll be stepping down as CEO of Eternal, and he'll move into a vice chairman role instead. And his successor, Albinder Dinsa, the founder of Blinkit. That sends a really strong message that the company's next phase is all about execution and scale, led by another proven operator. So why step down? Goyal was pretty blunt about it. The day-to-day pressure of running a huge public company, the constant focus on quarterly results, doesn't really fit with the wild, high-risk, experimental mindset of a founder. He basically wants to get back to building things from scratch, to explore those crazy ideas again. So just think about that. A founder who felt so ignored that he built a company no one could possibly ignore. He turned a simple menu website into a delivery machine, and then he bet everything on an even harder problem. He's already figured out what India eats for dinner, so you just have to wonder, what's the next impossible problem he's going to obsess over?